building, taxability of renting of immovable property used for residence. Friend, this services was exempt till 18 July 2022. And after 18 July 2022, some decrease has been made in that exemption notification, and that has created a lot of havoc amongst all the general public that whether they would be now required to pay tax or not. We will also deal with that situation. Fourth is the proposed mechanism for filing the return, that is GSTR 3B return. Friends, everyone knows that the GSTR 3B was a temporary return which was introduced in the year 2017 in lieu of return GSTR 2 and GSTR 3. As all of you are aware that now GSTR 2 and GSTR 3 has been scrapped out by the government. And GSTR 3B, which was a temporary form, that has now become a mandatory, and lot of changes are there in GSTR 3B. We will also see how to file that GSTR 3B or what changes has taken place. Next one is the cancellation of registration and its revocation. And last one is the certain other changes which are there notified by way of a certain clarification which has been issued in the month of in the month of August 2022. Now let's go to the things at a time. First one is the interest on delayed payment of GST. Now everyone knows that interest is the part and parcel of the taxation system. Whenever there is a delay in making payment of tax, the interest is inevitable and everyone has to pay the tax. Now let's see how the law has been drafted. Section 50, it says interest deals with the interest on delayed payment of tax, and it says that if any person, a taxpayer person, fails to pay the tax, then that person shall be liable to discharge the interest liability which has been remains unpaid on his own, not exceeding 24%, or as may be notified by the government on the recommendation of the council. So highest cap has been prescribed that 24, not more than 18% can be recovered from the SSC, and it has to be only payable when the taxpayer fails to discharge the tax liability. Now, very important thing. Proviso says, what proviso says? That the interest on tax payable in respect of supplies made during a tax period and declared in the return for the same period furnished after the due date in accordance with the provisions of section 39 shall be levied on that portion of tax that is paid by debiting in the electronic credit ledger. Now this word levied, mark the word levied, which has been which was replaced, and it has been for the period it shall be paid. So here the important question was that whenever earlier prior to 2021, the question was that whenever the interest has to be levied, at that point of time, whether it is a mandatory to pay the interest or any notices has to be issued for the recovery of the interest. That was the question. So now they have earlier in 2017 the word was it shall be levied, and the word levied has been replaced by the word shall be paid. Here there is a mistake. It shall be replaced by levied. So that means before the interest has to be levied by the proper officer, first of all the issuance of notice was important, and therefore before the levy of interest the SSA will ask the taxpayer whether do you want to say anything, and then after hearing out he will levy the interest before 2021. Now the law has been changed and it has been said that interest has to be paid on the late payment, and now it is not necessary that show cause notice has to be levied on that. Though this amendment is not is of today, but I thought this is very much important because the lot many notices of 2017-18 comes wherein this is the cause of concern, and therefore I thought it fit that this has to be bring to the notice. Then subsection 3 of the section 50 which deals with the interest. Section 50 subsection 3 has been amended with effect from 5th day of July 2022. Retrospective amendment has been made. Now what retrospective amendment has been made? It says that where any input tax credit has been wrongly availed and utilized, The registered person shall pay the interest on such input tax credit wrongly availed and utilized at such rate not exceeding 24% as may be notified by the government, and the interest shall be calculated in such manner as may be prescribed. So now they have prescribed the manner in which the interest has to be calculated, and for that matter, Rule 88B has been introduced with effect from 5th day of July 2022. So now we will see how the interest has to be calculated when there is a short payment of tax or the input tax credit has been wrongly availed and utilized. The rate of interest has been amended also from 18% with effect from 1st day of July 2017. So this amendment they have carried, this is a welcome provision. By welcome provision, earlier so many time what has happened that taxpayer has avail the input tax credit, but they have not utilized the input tax credit. Utilization of input tax credit means they have not used for making payment of outward tax liability. That means there is a balance in their electronic credit ledger. They have not utilized that electronic credit ledger for payment of tax. That means they have not utilized the input tax credit. Now, in that respect, though they have taken the credit but not utilized whether the interest would be liable to be paid or not to be paid. That was the issue. Now, if you see this prior to this amendment, there was no specific provision which was available wherein the interest has to be chargeable, and the matter has went to the court that what is to be done. That we will come at a later time after 5 minutes of time and see whether the interest would be payable on only wrongly availed credit or not. Now the law has been very specific and it says that interest would be applicable only if you have wrongly availed and utilization. So utilization is very important. So now let's see how the interest has to be calculated. First thing, now this is the facts of the case, what I have done. Now in this case the taxpayer ने क्या किया, उसका जुलाई 22 का रिटर्न उसने फाइल कर दिया 20th September 2022 को, जो 31 days delay था, because the due date for filing the July return is 20th August 2022. During the July 22, it was it was observed that by mistake GST 3B of May 2022 was wrongly filed as nil return. तो जुलाई में जब रिटर्न फाइल कर रहे थे, जुलाई का रिटर्न फाइल कर रहे थे इन द मंथ ऑफ सितंबर, दे हैव नोटिस कि जब मई मंथ का रिटर्न फाइल किया तो उन्होंने फाइल कर दिया था नील रिटर्न. दैट मींस दे हैव नॉट शोन देयर आउटपुट टैक्स लायबिलिटी, नीदर शोन एज इनपुट टैक्स लायबिलिटी. So naturally now they have come to know that this mistake is there. Naturally it has to be rectified. How it has to be rectified? Under the GST law, what it says, now you cannot amend your original return. That means for the month of July, whatever you have to do, make a return up revise nahi kar sakte, because the concept of revision of return is not there. Then what is the option? You have to revise, you have to make the correction in the month of July, for the month of July 2022. और उसमें हमें करेक्शन करके करना है. So now how we will show it? So now let's assume that output tax liability for July 22 is 10,000 rupees and input supply of July 22 is 5,000 rupees. Now for the month of May, output tax liability was 5,000 and input supply for May 22 was 3,000. So this May month's whole liability of 2,000 rupees has been not declared while filing the return for May 2022. So now let's see कैसे होता है. Now this is the tabulation. Now how to calculate the interest liability, in that we are interested. Now we have to calculate the liability because this output tax liability of May 2022 was not disclosed. तो उसकी liability हम कैसे गिनेंगे? Now period of supply is May 22. Period of return of GST 3B we are disclosing in July 22. My tax on output supply would be 5,000. Tax on output supply would be 5,000. Tax on input supply would be nil, because this input tax credit we can avail it only in the month in which we are taking. That means July 22 का रिटर्न करेंगे, उसमें हम ले रहे हैं, तभी उसकी क्रेडिट नोट नहीं लेनी पड़ेगी, and not in the month of May 2022. Say therefore there is no input tax credit available for the month of May 22. So my net cash liability would be 5,000 rupees. Last date for filing GSTR 3B return for the month of July 22 is 20th September. Due date of filing GSTR 3B for the month of May 22 is 20th July. So there is a delay of 92 days. So interest will be calculated on 5,000 rupees at the rate of 18% for 92 days, which comes to 227 rupees. Right. Now let's come to the further July 22 का कौन सा figures डालेंगे. Now in July 22 my output tax liability is 10,000 rupees. Input tax credit is 5,000 rupees for the month of July and 3,000 rupees for the month of May 2022, 8,000. So my input tax on supply would be 8,000 rupees. So my net cash liability would be 10,000 minus 8,000 would be 2,000. My due date for filing of GSTR 3B returns is 20th September. Due date for filing of GST 3B for the month of July is also August. So there is a delay of 31 days. So the interest tax liability has to be calculated on the net basis, that is 2,000 rupees. 2,000 pay 31 days is delay. So 31 rupees is the interest. So overall my interest liability would be 257 rupees. This is how you have to calculate the interest liability. So I am sure that now you would have understood that how the interest tax liability is to be calculated. So similarly, अगर 2-3 महीने का interest रह गया है आपका भरने का, or you have not come to know that these are the changes which has taken place because of the non-reporting of the output supply liability, or there is an amendment in the output tax liability, or there is a non-disclosure of input tax liability, then how the interest liability has to be calculated. Friends, इसके लिए you have to have a separate Excel sheet which has to be ready. It would be otherwise very difficult to calculate the interest tax liability. And very important, an interesting fact. Now, while filing the return for GST or 3B, you have to specifically show for which while taking out the interest liability, the utility GST and portal will calculate the interest liability. Now, for that matter, you have to bifurcate that for which month you are filing the return and what is the amount of liability. Now, at that point of time, if you are committing a mistake, then there would be a wrong calculation of interest liability. And at the time of assessment, you will have to pay a more interest. Therefore, one has to be very much careful. Now, let's see the another scenario. Now this is a scenario of ITC wrongly availed and utilized. So हमने बताया कि ITC wrongly availed and utilized. तो उसमें कैसे गिनने का? Now the fact is that the taxpayer has availed the ITC in the month of April 22 of rupees 10,000 rupees. In July 22, he has realized that this ITC was ineligible. जुलाई में 22 में उसको पता चला कि मैंने कुछ renting of motor cab का ITC ले लिया है, which is ineligible pursuant to section 17(5). So this needs to be reversed. अभी reverse तो करना है, but with interest करना है. Correct? Now how to calculate the interest? So section 50 subsection 3, read with rule 88B जो अभी introduced हुआ. They say that interest is levied only if the availed ITC is utilized. So मैंने बताया था कि interest तभी लगेगा when you are utilizing the ITC. Now, how you will determine that there is a utilization of ITC? Then what it tries to say that if the electronic credit ledger balance has been reduced to the extent of ITC utilized, then that manner it is said that you have utilized the input tax credit. So now let's see by way of an example. Now we have seen that in the month of April 2022, you have wrongly availed the input tax credit of 10,000 rupees. Now in the month of April 22, there was a balance available in the electronic credit ledger of 30,000 rupees. So that we have to see that whether this person has utilized the ITC or not. Since there is a balance in the electronic credit ledger, we can very safely presume that 10,000 rupees ITC has not been utilized. So for the month of 10,000 rupees, there is no interest liability. Right? Now let us come to the month of May. In the month of May, my balance comes of electronic credit ledger comes to 9,000 rupees. So that means कि मैंने 1,000 rupees avail कर दिया है from 10,000 rupees. So since my electronic credit ledger balance is less than 10,000 rupees, ITC is utilized equal to 10,000 minus 9,000. So ITC utilized is 1,000. Ineligible ITC unutilized 9,000. Still 9,000 rupees ITC is unutilized, which is ineligible. So my interest liability would be only on 1,000 rupees, which would be attracted at the rate of. So my interest liability has to be calculated on 1,000 rupees only. Let's come to the next month, June month. In the June month, my balance in electronic credit ledger was 5,000 rupees. So now we have to again see whether I have utilized. Yes, I have utilized. My balance is previously my balance was 5,000 rupees. 9,000 rupees was my ineligible ITC. So how much I have utilized? 4,000 rupees ITC I have utilized. So again, my interest liability will be on 4,000 rupees and 5,000 rupees still मेरा unutilized ITC पड़ा हुआ है out of 10,000 rupees. Now we are coming for the month of July 22, wherein my output supply is more than ITC because my balance is nil in electronic credit ledger. That means मैंने पूरा 5,000 रुपया यूज कर दिया है, तो मुझे पूरे 5,000 के ऊपर interest liability लगेगा, and this interest has to be payable in the month of July because in the month of July 22 I have to reverse the 10,000 rupees excess ITC which has been taken in the month of April, 10,000 rupees along with interest at the rate of 18%. That comes to 360 rupees. So this is how the working of interest liability has to be made. Now this is a very cumbersome task, but we have to go for this. So best option while filing the return itself, the care has to be taken that it has to be filed properly and within time so that this cumbersome calculation of interest would be taken care of. So this was as regards the interest.
Ashit Bhai, one question is there.
Yeah.
This interest is calculated at 18% or 24%?
18%, sir. Because now the rate of tax has been reduced with retrospective effect from first day of July 2017. Here I have said now. In the subsection 3 only it has been mentioned. And if you will see the rate ka interest ka notification, then that also says that rate of interest would be 18%. This is the rate notification 13/2017. It says that subsections interest liability section 50 subsection 3 the rate of tax is 18%, and this has been introduced substitute for 24%. So it has been at the rate of 18%.
Ashit Bhai,
Yeah.
one more query. For interest calculation on ineligible ECL, balance to be adjusted as SGST against SGST.
Bhavin, can you be little bit louder?
Yes. For interest calculation on ineligible ECL, balance to be adjusted as SGST against SGST, CGST against CGST, IGST against IGST, or cross utilization is allowed. For example, ineligible ITC is for IGST. But in ECL balance available in S and CGST.
So Bhavin, in my view, once the credit is exhaust in the electronic credit ledger, it becomes an balance in my electronic credit ledger. Then the GST, SGST, and CGST will not be there. This bifurcation is there only for the perspective of the portal, which is there. But if we see in the law, nowhere in the law it says that input tax credit will be again bifurcated in C, S, and I. So in my view, it is if you have balance in another account, you can very well adjust it, and only on the balance portion the interest liability has to be worked it out. I think in certain judicial pronouncement also, I don't recollect the citation, but it has been held that if you have the balance in the other account, so that means if you have a liability in C plus S and you have balance in I, then definitely no interest liability would be a reason. Let me tell you that I time and again tell when in every lecture that if you wanted to file the return or if you wanted to follow the port, there are two laws which exist in the GST. One is the law which has been promulgated or passed by the parliament, which is known as a CGST Act, SGST Act and IGST Act. Another law is the GSTN law, portal law. Both portal law and actual law, in many aspects, it differs from each other. This is the classic example, right? Because in the portal law, this bifurcation needs to be there for the ease of calculation, but this law will not override the main law. So in the main law, that is the CGST Act or SGST Act or IGST Act, input tax credit means it is a combination of all the credit which has been bifurcated, and it is not bifurcated into the compartment wise like I, C and S.
Ashit bhai, one more query. Dealer had filed return late. Tax liability is on account of ocean freight on RCM basis. Now that it is clarified by Supreme Court.
Bhavin, your voice is gone.
That ocean freight will not attract tax. Should we pay interest or protest?
So, Bhavin, your voice was in the meat of the thing. It has Can you just repeat the
see, return has been filed late. RCM has been paid on ocean freight.
Okay.
No other liability as such is there. Only ocean freight liability is there. Now, with this Mohit Minerals judgment, the department is still asking for interest. So, should we pay that interest?
No, absolutely not. Why should you pay? Because when the tax itself is not leviable, then how the interest will be leviable? Interest is leviable only if tax is payable. Now, because of this judgment that there is no tax liability, so then where is the question of interest?
Yes. Yes, you can continue. Ashit bhai.
Yeah.
You can continue.
Yeah. Okay.
All queries are answered.
Okay. Done. Now, I was talking about the interest for wrong availment before the retrospective amendment. Now, I was asking, a query has been raised, say for example, the month of December 2017, when the law was new, many taxpayers has taken the so many input tax credit, whether they are eligible or ineligible, but they have not utilized it. So the question has came to the court whether the wrong availment itself could levy the interest or not, or the interest has to be levied only on the merely availment of the input tax credit. That means the taxpayer has not utilized the amount which is lying in the electronic credit ledger. Then on non-utilization, or if there is a balance in the electronic credit balance, the interest would be chargeable or not. The court has said that the interest would be applicable only on the payment of tax and not merely wrong availment of input tax credit. Right? If the interest under section 50 subsection 3 of the CGST is to be levied only when the wrongly availed credit has been utilized by the taxpayer. So this has been upheld by the Punjab High Court in the case of Steel Engineering versus State of Bihar, wherein it was concluded that interest has to be charged from the SSC only if the wrongful availment of input tax credit was used for reducing the output tax liability. That means agar aapne utilized that. So on the basis of, because of this judgment, they have amended section 50 subsection 3 and upheld that the interest would be liable only if you have wrongly availed and utilized. Agar aapne wo paisa use kiya hai तो ही आपको टैक्स इंटरेस्ट भरना है, अदरवाइज आपको इंटरेस्ट भरना नहीं है. ठीक है. And for that matter, they have given us the methodology also in rule 88B, and we have to follow that. So now that air has been cleared, how to determine the interest liability on wrongfully availment and utilization. So this is was as regards the interest. Now आते हैं next इसमें. GTA, Goods Transport Agency. ये जो सर्विस है, as I said earlier, it is applicable to all the people, especially those who are dealing in goods, because without transportation of goods, the business cannot survive. In respect of service industry, probably they may not have the pinch of this or the importance of this Goods Transport Agency. So now, first of all, let us try to understand who is this GTA. This Goods Transport Agency means any person who provides services in relation to transport of goods by road and issues consignment note by whatever name hold. So जो बंदा सर्विस देता है for transportation of goods by road, and if he issues the consignment note by whatever name code, he becomes a goods transport agency. So someone has asked me that suppose a transporter is there and if he doesn't issue consignment note, what will happen? Then it is not a goods transport agency. My view would be no, it's not like that. If you read carefully, it says he is not merely transport the goods by road and issues the consignment note by whatever name code. So it is not necessary that he has to issue the consignment note only. If in his tax invoice, if he gives all the details of consignment note, then also he is deemed that he is a goods transport agency. So now the $1 million question, what kind of information is required to be put on the consignment note? So consignment note में क्या होता है? Unfortunately or unfortunately, in the GST law, it has not been defined, but in the erstwhile service tax law, it has been defined what kind of content has to be provided in the good consignment note, and wherein it says that consignment में आपको क्या लिखना है? सबसे पहले लिखना है goods कहाँ से पिकअप कर रहे हो और goods कहाँ unload कर रहे हो. Second thing, you have to mention the gross weight and net weight. Third thing, you have to mention where who is the consignor and who is the consignee. Goods कहाँ लेके जाना है उसका और weight कितना है. These are the important details which should form part and parcel of consignment note. Now, because this is a separate note, so many transport agencies put all these details of consignment note in the their invoice only, so they need not have to prepare the two invoices or two documents separately. So hence there would only be a one document, and that would be suffice to deem as a goods transport agency. Now, how the taxation method comes. From 18th July 2022, they have made some tinkle in the taxability. Now let's see prior to the amendment, that means prior to 18th July 2022, how the goods transport agency is to discharge the tax liability. GTA has two options. Either to discharge the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism, or either under the reverse charge mechanism by the recipient of service, that means they will not pay, or they will discharge the tax liability under forward charge mechanism at the rate of 12%. So here says charge at the rate of 5%, then it would be covered under RCM, and recipient is liable to discharge the GST under RCM. So transporter को कुछ करना नहीं था. Even he would be exempted from the registration under the GST law अगर he is providing exclusively the services on which the tax needs to be discharged under reverse charge mechanism. तो उसको रजिस्टर लेना भी जरूरत ना. But when he is opting under the 5% tax, that means RCM, then he is not eligible to claim the input tax credit on the goods or services procured by him for providing the transportation services. Naturally, वो tax नहीं भर रहा है, तो उसे कोई input tax credit नहीं मिलेगी. The other option is forward charge mechanism. That means transporter will say, yes, I will discharge the tax liability under forward charge mechanism. That means while issuing the invoice, he will levy the tax at the rate of 12% to the consignor or a consignee and recover the tax and pay it to the government after. And now in this situation, he is eligible to take the input tax credit on the goods or services procured by him. Now, so very important question comes over here. Prior to 18 July 22, whether this option is qua transaction or qua year or qua transporter. Again, I am repeating. ये जो option था 5% or 12%, that means RCM and FCM, whether a transporter can opt only a single method during the year. That means suppose उसने सोचा कि मुझे RCM में pay करना है, that means he need not have to discharge tax liability on all the transaction. So that means सारा tax भरेगा सामने वाला, या पार्ट ऑफ द ट्रांजैक्शन इस एक बंदा आया उसके पास, वो बोला कि मुझे तो आप फॉरवर्ड चार्ज पे लगाओ, दूसरा बंदा बोलता है नहीं मैं टैक्स भर दूंगा क्योंकि ट्रांसपोर्टर लोग आप रिटर्न नहीं भरते हो तो मुझे इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगी. सो ट्रांसपोर्टर हैज दैट ऑप्शन और नॉट. आई वुड लाइक टू हैव योर व्यूज प्रायर टू दिस अमेंडमेंट. तो अभी नया अमेंडमेंट अपने को पता चलेगा. यस, व्हाट्स योर व्यू? एनीवन? Those who wants to give their views just raise their hand and put in the chat box. Yeah, Bhavin bhai, anyone is there?
Raj Shah is telling quad transaction.
Bhavin bhai, your voice is very.
Raj Shah is saying quad transaction.
Saying it is to be quad transaction.
This is the quad transaction. Correct. That means that ट्रांसपोर्टर विल डिसाइड कि ये जो मेरा ट्रांजैक्शन है उसमें मुझे 5% टैक्स लगाना या 12% करके 5% सामने वाला भर देगा या 12% आई विल पे. यस, आई कॉन्कर विद द व्यू ऑफ राज that this option was a qua transaction and not qua SSC qua year wise. Now let's see the what is the amendment. Now from 16th July 2022, the law has changed, and now what the law has provided. Now law has said that the GTA has only two options. He has to decide whether he has to discharge the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism or he has to discharge the tax liability under forward charge mechanism. So अगर उसने forward charge mechanism decide कर लिया, then again he will have a two option. Either he has to take the levy the tax at the rate of 5% while issuing the invoice, but he will not eligible for ITC, or he has to pay 12% of GST under forward charge mechanism and avail the whole ITC. So these are the, if he is decided that I will pay the tax under forward charge mechanism, but he says that I don't want to pay tax under forward charge mechanism, but the tax will be paid by the recipient of the services, then in that case rate of tax would be 5% and the recipient of the service of the GTA service will discharge the tax liability. Okay. So now the transporter has having an option and they have to decide in the beginning of the year in which option he has to go, whether in the forward charge mechanism or a reverse charge mechanism. Now this option has to be exercised on or before 15th of the year, before the 15th of the March of the preceding previous year. That means financial year 23-24 ka 15th before 15th of March, the transporter has to opine whether he is under RCM or whether under FCM. ये option हर एक साल में उसे लेना है. Now this we are in the financial year 22-23. On 16th July this has come. तो कभी ऑप्शन ऑप्ट करने का तो उन्होंने बता दिया कि आपको ये ऑप्शन ट्रीट करना है क्योंकि 15th of March तो चली गई थी. सो उन्होंने बताया आपको 16th August 2022 which has already been there कि पहले ऑप्शन एक्सरसाइज ऑप्शन करना है whether GTA will follow under the RCM or under the FCM. If he is follow under RCM, he need not have to charge the check, but the recipient will be liable to pay the tax. However, the recipient is eligible to avail the input tax credit if it is available to him. He has to check his eligibility. If he is opt that yes मुझे forward charge पे charge करना है, then again two option 5% भर दो without ITC, 12% भर दो with ITC. This is the requirement. Now if suppose if the option has not been exercised, 16th August चली गई, बहुत सारे ट्रांसपोर्टर रहेगा, लो नया है, बराबर है, and that due date is default, then by default the GTA will fall under RCM and tax will have to be discharged under RCM by the service recipient. So that means कि mandatorily RCM में चला जाएगा. Now suppose genuinely if some transporter wanted to avail under FCM, then can he file late? Now to my mind, suppose आज उसको मेरा हमने डिस्कस किया और कोई बंदा रह गया था, उसको पता चला है today we are on the 26th of August, उसे पता चला कि मुझे करना चाहिए, now 16th August is gone. So can he file off the exercise? To my mind, yes, he can very well do it because this is a procedural error and accordingly the delay has to be condoned and if it, and the option can be also exercised to pay the discharge the tax liability under the FCM. वो ले सकता है. Now when a person is a GTA is under this selecting this option, then in the invoice he has to file one declaration. क्या declaration file करना है? He has to say I or we have taken registration under CGST 2017 and have exercised the option to pay the tax on service of GTA in relation to transport of goods supplied by us during the financial year so under forward charge. ये उसे declaration देना है, बराबर है. Now the important thing comes. Why all these things are necessary? All these things are necessary because अगर उसको रिवर्स चार्ज में भरना है तो वहां उसे टिक करना है कि who is liable to discharge the tax liability. सेकंड चीज, अगर वो फॉरवर्ड चार्ज में भर रहा है तो उसे रजिस्ट्रेशन भी लेना है, and he has to mention the number also. Now this has another repercussion also. While a person who is availing the services of GTA, he while maintaining his books of account, उसके लेजर में उसका ये GST नंबर भी लिखना है. Why? Because if he is under audit, income tax purpose के लिए. So now अभी last week में अपना टैक्स ऑडिट के ऊपर सेमिनार था, वहां क्लोज 44 था, which is nowadays talk of the town. वहां भी every SSC who is under audit has to give the information whether the expenses incurred by them is from registered person, unregistered person, or a person is under composition scheme. ये सारी exercise करनी है. Now how can it be possible if the person doesn't know all these things? Then therefore such kind of declaration has to be mentioned on the invoice, and one has to update their accounts master books also, so that all this information can be available at a stretch, and one can comply the various laws from books of account. If we see the taxpayer's perspective, taxpayer is one, and he has to abide by so many laws. He has to abide by direct tax law, that means income tax. Under indirect tax law, he has to abide by the GST. फिर उसको दूसरे जो laws है, like profession tax, like ESIC, PF, so many statutory laws has to be complied, and all these laws has to be complied from one source, and that source is your books of account. So your books of account should be in such a manner that a taxpayer should be in a position to take out all the details which are required under different statute, so that he can comply the law in a better manner and without paying any penalty. Because nowadays the penalties under all the laws are so heavy that it becomes very much difficult for the taxpayer. Now let's go to the next thing. Same under the GST, what are the things? Now one of the exemption which has been provided to GTA has been withdrawn. What was that? The exemption which is contained in notification number 12, which has been withdrawn. Now what it says, that where the consideration for transportation in a single carriage does not exceed 1500 rupees, or where the consideration for transportation of all such goods in a single carriage does not exceed 750, then this exemption one did not have to discharge the tax liability. So exemption was there. Now this exemption has been withdrawn. So ये withdraw कर दिया, उसका मतलब क्या हो गया? Now if you pay 500 rupees also for transporting of goods from one place to another, then in that case the tax liability has to be discharged either by that GTA under FCM, or the tax liability has to be discharged by the recipient of the services. So now what are the implications of this? Now many a times you will observe that my factory is at one place, from where the goods has to be taken over to the transporters go down. तो वहां बाहर टेम्पो वाला खड़ा रहता है, वो टेम्पो वाले की सर्विस लेते हैं. Now that tempo wala is used only for the shorter distance to transport the goods from the factory premises to the transporters go down, or in a nearby area. Now in that situation, whether this withdrawal of exemption would be hit or not, in my view, yes. Whenever you are making the payment to this transporter, who generally does not issue the consignment note, and he is issuing the invoices only on the basis of per trip or per transportation, and of say 500 rupees or 700 rupees or 1000 rupees, and deliver the goods. Now in that case, till now the exemption was provided, but now all such tempo walas or a local transport have to discharge the GST liability either under FCM or under RCM. Of course, if they have decided that yes, I wanted to discharge under forward charge mechanism, then their turnover must be more than 20 lakhs rupees, then and then only they can opt for it. If they say yes, no, my turnover is less than 20 lakhs rupees, then there is no issue, he will be unregistered. But suppose if he says that no, I want my turnover is more than 20 lakhs, then in that case he has an option either to select FCM or RCM and comply the law. So this is as regards the withdrawal of the exemption from 6th day of July 2022. Now there are certain other exemptions which I thought one must know about the GTA. It says that transportation services of the following goods are exempt under entry number 21 of notification 12/2017. That means if you are transporting these goods, then there won't be any charge of GST. Which are those goods? Number one, agricultural produce, milk, salt or food grains, organic manure, newspaper and magazine, relief material for victims of natural calamities, and defense or military equipment. So if you are transporting all these goods, then no GST on this transportation services. That means it is exempt. So neither the transporter will levy the tax under FCM or under the RCM recipient has to give the tax. Another example, services of giving on hire to a goods transport agency a means of transportation goods is exempt under entry number 18 subclause B of notification number 12/2017. Now where this exemption will help? Many times a goods transport agency is there. उसके पास 5 ट्रक है और उसकी पांचों ट्रक रोड पे goods transport agency transportation work के लिए busy है. And he has got a call that yes, I want the 11th truck to be for delivery. So what weapon? उसने क्या किया? अपने भाईबंद को फोन किया, फ्रेंड को, कह रहे तेरे पास एक ट्रक है, मुझे दे दे, ये जानी है. वो बोला कितना रुपया? बोला 5,000 रुपया मेरा ट्रांसपोर्टेशन चार्ज. बोला ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं. So this gentleman GTA, what he has said, उन्होंने 7,500 रुपया चार्ज कर दिया क्लाइंट को, and he has done the transportation और 5,000 रुपया जिनकी ट्रक थी उसको दे दिया along with driver. Now in that case, the transport service, the goods transport agent service provided by the second person to the GTA would be exempt under notification number 18 subclause B if the same is used for the transportation of goods. But here very important thing one has to keep it in mind that the transport invoice or the consignment note has to be issued by the first person who is transporting the goods of the person. Otherwise it would be difficult. So this was the exemption. Then transportation services provided by GTA to unregistered individuals are also exempt. The query has been raised in 2000 that many a times the GTA provides the service, is registered, and then he says that yes, this transportation services I am provided to an unregistered person, and he says that the recipient is discharged to service tax liability. That means an unregistered person. Now in that case, what will happen? See the implication. Suppose I wanted to shift my office from say Ghatkopar to Malad. So for that matter, and I am an unregistered person, Sida Sada individual salaried caste class person. I have contacted the transporter to transport my office documents to the Malad office. Now for that matter, I have hired the transport agency. Now the transport agency says that tax has to be discharged under the RCM. So who has to discharge tax liability? I have to discharge. Now I am not registered, but because of the provisions of the GST law, section 25, which says compulsory registration in respect of certain transaction, wherein it says that in respect of when the tax has to be discharged under RCM, then in these circumstances, the registration is mandatory. So though I have avail the services of transportation charges, I have to discharge the tax liability in the RCM. So I have to register my tax, register my company, though I am not required to do that, and I have to discharge the tax liability. So for that reason, they have come out with this notification of exemption that when the transportation service provided to unregistered person, it would be exempted. Okay. Now, second thing is about the e-invoicing. Nowadays, e-invoicing becomes a very, very important area. All the persons, believe me, friends, will be under e-invoicing era. In 2020, the concept of e-invoicing has been introduced, and at that point of time, the limit was 100 crores. Now, from October 2022, this limit has been reduced to 10 crore rupees. And believe me, friend, that in the next 6 months, that means by 2023, when we are coming, that would be applicable to 1 crore rupee per person also. That means the government wants that every taxpayer has to issue the e-invoicing so that this fake invoicing can be controlled to a great extent. So now the e-invoicing at present is applicable to all the taxpayers whose turnover is more than 20 crore. This 10 crore rupee limit is applicable from 1st day of October 2022. So जिनका भी turnover now about 10 crore है in the financial year 17-18 to any year, then they need to require the registration under e-invoicing, and they have to issue the invoice. Now the thing is whether GTA is liable to issue the e-invoice. The reply to would be that they need not have to register for the invoice because it's not applicable. However, they have to mention on their invoice a declaration. What declaration? It says, we hereby declare that though our aggregate turnover in any preceding financial year from 17-18 onwards is more than the aggregate turnover, we are not required to prepare an invoice in terms of provisions of the same sub rule. That means e-invoicing का sub rule. This notification declaration has to be mentioned on all the invoices issued by the GTA. Now, suppose they have not put this declaration on invoice, what will happen then? This invoice would be tax invoice would be considered as defective invoices. There is a penalty which has been prescribed under section 122, and then what is the penalty? 10,000 rupees or tax evaded, whichever is earlier under section 122 penalty is there. यहाँ तो tax evasion का कोई problem नहीं है. So the penalty would be 10,000 rupees for no compliance of the law. So 10,000 रुपया per invoice penalty हो जाएगी if the officer wants to levy. So one has to be very much careful. अभी एक इसमें और क्लोजर आ जाएगा. Let us see what is the consequences. Now prior to 18 July 2022, here it's 202 हो गया, it should be 22. GTA adopted to discharge the GST liability under RCM. उसने कहा कि मुझे तो RCM नहीं करो, कोई मतलब नहीं है ये सब GST लो कॉम्प्लाई करने का, रिटर्न भरो, क्यों करने का, टैक्समैन कंसल्टेंट को पैसा दो 12 रिटर्न का, उससे अच्छा that tax liability will be discharged by the recipient only. However, from 18 July 2022, now the law has changed and given a liability that either FCM करो और RCM, और फिर उसे पता चला कि मैं तो यार मेरे पास 25 ट्रक है, उसकी क्रेडिट लेनी चाहिए. So now I should shift from RCM to FCM. Now first question, can he do so? Up till 18 July he was under RCM. Now can he shift to FCM? Yes, he has all the right to change to FCM. Very good. उसने declaration भी भर दिया before 18 July, before 16th August 2022, which he has to select the option. और उसने वहाँ बता दिया कि now I will discharge the tax liability under forward charge mechanism. Now he says yes, I wanted to avail the input tax credit. So that means he will levy the tax at the rate of 12% and avail the credit. So now the question comes, what will happen to the capital goods which is held by him and which will be used for providing the output services after 18 July 2022? Whether can he be eligible to claim the input tax credit on the same? So मैंने बताया एग्जांपल पे कि सपोज उसके पास 2022 में 25 ट्रक थी और उसका वो एक साल से यूज कर रहा था और उसने अभी तक इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट नहीं लिया है. So whether now he would be eligible to claim the input tax credit for the remaining life of the asset, because it would be used for the providing the taxable output services. So what would they think? Whether he would be eligible to claim, or he would be eligible to claim only on the new capital goods which has been purchased after 18 July 2022, और उसको पहले का जो capital goods है उसके ऊपर benefit नहीं मिलेगा. Yes. What are your views? चलो, raise your hand. Mr. Anmol Singh has raised his hand. Anmol Singh क्या कहते हैं?
To Anmol. Ashit bhai, meanwhile there are some questions. The new amendment of GTA is effective from which date?
18 July, no?
Okay. One more question. In case of trailer is given on lease basis to registered person, will such transaction would also be eligible for exemption under the notification 12 of 2017? Note if recipient is providing logistic services and GTA services.
So I believe you are saying कि वो जो बंदा है वो lease पे दे रहा है, but not on hiring of GTA. So there is a difference between hiring and leasing. right? So if the we lease, maybe two types of lease are there: dry lease and wet lease. That means dry lease mein without driver rehta hai. That means the whole effective control and possession has been given to the lessee. Correct. Now, in that case, if it's a dry lease, that means without driver hai, that means effective control and possession has been handed over, then it amounts to it doesn't amount to hiring or renting of a equipment or a truck or a goods, and accordingly this provision would not be applicable. But if it is a wet lease, that means with a driver, that means effective control and possession has not been parted, then in that respect he can be able to take the benefit. But if you use the word lease, then it means that the effective control and possession has been parted, and accordingly the benefit of exemption would not be available. But one has to see the agreement and then only opine.
Sir, one more thing. Mr. Nilesh Mehta has written, from what I understand, when you say that tempo wala hiring, you mean to say that in case of GTA, GCN, I think goods consignment note is selling, has no relevance for RCM, as earlier only RCM was payable where goods consignment note is issued. So, like, sir, if there is a local, what I understand is, if say services of local tempo wala is taken, he normally issues a voucher or an invoice. He doesn't issue
consignment note. Yes, very true, very true.
So in that case, a separate entry for exemption is there. I suppose in exemption notification. I think he's referring to that issue for transport as such is exemption. And GTA, it means the GTA has further been defined like a person issuing goods consignment note. So are these two entries separate, and exemption to tempo wala is there or not?
Can you, Nilesh bhai, tell me which is the entry you are trying to refer for under exemption? I have just posted here the GTA ka thing. Just a second.
Nilesh bhai.
Yeah.
Can you just give me
Nilesh bhai, you can unmute yourself.
What distinction are you trying to make?
What I am trying to say is, earlier the law said that the GTN person is only liable to do this, correct?
Correct.
So he used to, what is the definition of the payment of reverse RCM was? A good consignment note issue are only on that we used to pay the taxes and RCM.
So, sir, as I have told in the beginning, that in whatever manner the consignment note has to be called. Now, बहुत सारे person in the invoice itself, we will put all the details of consignment note. So, does it mean that though all the details are there of the consignment note on the invoice, that person would not be considered as a goods transport agency? That is my first thing. Second thing, if suppose a GTA fails to issue consignment note, then does it mean that he is not a GTA or he is not transporting the goods? I think it's difficult.
So then what was the need of defining that GTN as a person who is receiving GSN when the law defined that?
See, the purpose over to me, it appears that normally whenever a transportation takes place, all these details are mandatory. Now, suppose if the person doesn't put the gross weight or net weight, or from where it has been lifted and where it has to be unloaded, then it might not be, he may not be carried out the transportation service, right? Now, if these details are not there, then can you hold that GTA that you have not provided me the services? It would be very difficult.
I will give you an example, sir. In Bombay, every goods in the Bombay city, electric bazaar or kapda bazaar, they take it to the independent stores in throughout Bombay. So one bale or one packet is given to each and every this one for a common transport. He issues only a pauti. Okay, and the next day goods are delivered.
Correct.
Now, what do you mean to say? That was the relevance of good consignment note, GCN. For that was not applicable. Suppose it was above 750 or about 1,500.
Correct. Yes, exactly, sir. And that's why the exemption has been given. Now you are rightly clear that this exemption was there. That if it is of a lesser value, then the exemption was provided. If it is less than 750 for all the transportation and on 1,500 for a single carriage. That's why this exemption has been provided for this small time kind of transport operator. Now this exemption has been withdrawn, and that's why the problem is there.
So now what you mean to say that each and everything that is transported has to be RCM?
Yes, either RCM or FCM, whatever.
RCM is their choice. RCM is our choice.
True. No, but only the thing is, sir, suppose that transporter is there whose turnover is less than 20 lakhs rupees, then he will say, no, that no, that also he cannot. Then he will pay it under 5%. That means ultimately now tax has to be payable minimum 5%.
By everybody. Now what about the question of registration? So now everybody should register because I have to pay RCM.
Pardon?
Then in that case, every person who is exempted person also has to register under section 25 because he has to pay RCM because he has to transport his good by anyway. By tempo.
Exactly. So tempo wala is whenever he issues the pauti, he has to say tax has to be payable by the recipient. That means recipient means the person who avails the service, he has to discharge the tax liability of 5% for every transport.
So according to section 25, everybody has to register now in that case because I have to pay RCM.
Yes. Definitely, sir.
So now the number of SSs will increase according to you that way.
But sir, in my view, sir, now everyone is covered under the mechanism of GTA. Because either he must be a registered taxable person under the GST, or he must be a factory, partnership firm, LLP. That 7 categories has been provided. If he falls under that 7 categories, he has to pay it under reverse charge mechanism. Sir, just a minute. If he is unregistered, sir, just a minute.
So where is the question of 20 lakhs and 40 lakhs in that case?
20 lakhs, sir. For services, the limit is 20 lakhs.
Yeah, but I am a RCM, I am a regular dealer. So my limit is 40 lakhs. But if I trade a transport service, I have to register.
Mandatorily, you have to pay, sir.
Then where is the question of that 40 lakh limit?
Yeah. And it will not have any purpose.
So then each and every dealer in Mumbai, without transportation, nothing works. So,
True. Correct. So more revenue and more number of players. So that is the reason of selecting this service into this our today's discussion. That its implication is very wide, though it looks very simple.
Yes, Ashit.
I'm not getting it.
Hello, Ashit bhai?
Yeah,
you can continue.
yeah. अभी here whether the in this question उसमें कौन क्या बताना चाहता है, whether a GTA can claim the input tax credit of capital goods which is already he was enjoying, can he be able to take the input tax credit after 18 July 22? I want your view. मुझे कल एक opinion देना है Monday को.
Mr. Amol is saying yes.
Yeah, Mr. Anmol.
Pranav Bhai Kapadia is saying, in my view, tempo hiring is not covered under GTA.
Acha. Pranav Bhai, then where it will cover?
I'll just unmute him. Pranav Bhai.
Yeah,
Pranav.
Yeah, Ashit. I think in my view, tempo hiring is never covered under GTA services.
Okay.
So it would get covered under the normal provision. So RCM also was not applicable on the tempo hiring charges till now. Till 2022. So only
tempo wala has to. So there is no tax on the tempo wala.
No, so tempo hiring charges is not covered under GTA, so it is not eligible for that 5% rate of tax.
Okay.
In case if the tempo hiring is more than 20 lakh, his turnover is there, he will come under forward charge as a normal service.
Normal transportation of goods.
Normal transport, but he is not covered under GTA, so at least that reverse charge mechanism liability on the recipient is not there.
Okay.
On that count. So I think we need to view it in that proposition.
Okay, fine. Your point is taken, but my view is different. manner in which the definition has been provided. And the same thing was there under the service tax law also. And there also the same view we were taking. That's why this challenge is.
Right. Yeah, that could be a different view, but yeah.
Yeah. So Pranav, anything on this capital goods ka credit?
Is he eligible to ITC on capital goods which was not claimed by him? Now can he claim? I think he'll not be able to claim for the earlier period because at that point of time it was not eligible when he had purchased the vehicle. And it's an afterthought, so it's going to be a difficult proposition again in this case also. Claiming for the earlier period again, it could be say a few months old purchase, it could be few years old purchase. So it's not going to be an easy task to claim it for the earlier period, and especially if he was under 5% and he had not opted for input tax credit at that point, but at that point of time he was given the option of availing input tax credit, which he had not availed. Now the option is available. So at the most, if he wants to claim, maybe he needs to reduce the time frame in which for which the period was, for which this asset was already held by him. And that will be again, we'll have to see the department view on that. It's not going to be an easy task to claim that ITC.
Correct. Yeah. Any other view? Anmol Arora wanted to as raised.
Yes. So as per section 18, there are provisions whereby when a taxpayer switches from exempt supply to taxable supply or vice versa, if there are any capital goods available in stock, then the input tax credit of that means the capital asset will be considered having a life of 60 months. So proportionately from the date of his registration to the date when he is providing the exempt supply, means that will be considered as a period for which the months will ITC for which it will not be available, and for the balance period out of 60 months, the ITC would be available.
Yeah, Anmol, you are very much right. But unfortunately, very specific provision is not there. Section 18's 1 subsection B deals with that. It says when exempted supply become a taxable supply. Here exactly exempt supply doesn't become a taxable supply. The supply is already taxable, but here only the SSC has opted to discharge the tax liability instead of RCM. He is now saying I will discharge under FCM. So the supply is taxable supply. Only the who is discharging is a different thing. So that doesn't matter. Now the question is, you have very rightly pointed out. And if we see the whole scheme of taxation, the law says that whenever you are using the inputs for providing the output services, you are eligible to take the credit of the same. Now it is irrespective of the fact that that when you have availed that input tax, input services or input goods, as in respect of goods, it says that if the goods are in the stock as on the date when he has opted to discharge the tax liability, that means which is in stock, the taxpayer can able to claim the credit of the same. It is used for providing the taxable output supply. Similar mechanism or correlation can be put in respect of capital goods. Let's look where you have rightly pointed out that this goods, capital goods, has been used for providing output supply from 18 July 2022. So whatever is the lifetime of the asset, which is 5 years, that is 60 months, the months which has been used earlier for not paying the tax or for paying the tax under RCM, that has to be reduced, and on the balance definitely one can claim it. But this has to be tested it out, as Pranav has very rightly said, that we have to seek a clarification from the department. But it is worth taking a chance that such kind of thing is possible to claim the credit, because ultimately these goods or the inputs or the capital goods are used for providing the services and on which the tax has been discharged at a higher rate. And that is the whole, if we look at to the system or the whole GST law mechanism is there.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So now let's move on to the next thing. Now another very burning issue of renting of immobile property, which is used for dwelling of the for the residential use. So now what do you mean by renting? First of all, let us try to understand. So the law says, Schedule 3 says that renting of immobile property includes letting, leasing, licensing, or other similar arrangement in respect of immobile property. Then it means a renting of immobile property services. Now till 18 July 2022, sorry. Now this renting of property can be used for residential property, can be used for residential purpose or for the commercial purpose. Now let us first of all concentrate on the property which is used for residential purpose. Now till 18 July 2022, whenever a residential property is used for residential dwelling, then in that respect exemption was provided. But now after 18th, sorry, not 18th July, from 18th July, now it has been provided that that exemption notification has been changed. And now it says that if the renting of immobile property is used by for residential purpose by a registered person, then in that respect, the registered person has to discharge the GST liability under the reverse charge mechanism. So now let us see the whole scenario, how it will looks like. So scenario 1, an unregistered owner is there. Here Mr. Jethalal, he is rented out his residential property for residential purpose to an unregistered person, that is Babita. Naturally, he will love to give the residential property to Babita. Now in this situation, both the persons, lessor as well lazy, are unregistered. Then what would be the impact? The impact that there will be no GST impact, because the now here the lessor is unregistered, so he did not have to worry. Still the exemption is provided. Tenant is also unregistered, so there is no change. Even he need not have to register under the GST and discharge under GST liability. So in the scenario 1, he need not have to worry. The worry would come only onto the lessee when he is a registered. Otherwise, there is no implication. Scenario 2, here the owner or a lessor is a registered owner. He has given the his residential property for dwelling purpose to unregistered tenant. So here also, since the tenant or a lessee is unregistered, there won't be any impact. Still the exemption is continue, and though the turnover of the rent is more than 20 lakhs to the registered owner, we did not have to discharge the tax liability, because renting of residential dwelling used for residence is exempt under notification number 12/2017. So he has to still enjoy his life, registered owner as well as unregistered owner. Now let's come to the third situation. Owner is registered and tenant is also registered under the GST law, and the rent residential property has been given for residential purpose. Now what will happen? Since the lessee or a tenant is registered under the GST, now this provision will invoke. And what is the provision? It says that the registered person, that means here the tenant or a lessee, have to discharge the tax liability on the renting of immobile property. Though he is using it for residential purpose, he has to discharge the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism at the rate of 18%. So ये उनके लिए एक बड़ा hit आ गया, right? Though he is using for residential purpose, but then also he has to discharge the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism. Now what would be the implication? Now अभी तक ये registered owner था, because he is having some other business also as well as renting का thing. So on renting he was not paying the tax. But now what he needs to do? He has to issue the invoice for the renting. Most of the time, what we have observed, that whenever a renting of either movable or immobile property is given, whether it is for commercial use or residential use, कोई भी उसमें टैक्स इनवॉइस बनाता नहीं है. Let's say ये हमारा agreement है, on the basis of this monthly rental we are receiving, but they are doing something wrong. The owner has to issue the tax invoice on a monthly basis to the lessee, because this is the law. If the property is for commercial use, for commercial purpose, then the tax needs to be discharged. तो उसे invoice बनाना ही है. If that property used for is of residential property and used for residential purpose, then it's a exempt supply. There he has to issue the bill of supply if he wants to issue. But there the benefit is available, or that he need not have to issue the tax invoice. But in this case, now what will happen? The registered owner needs to issue a tax invoice under Rule 46. He has to report the same in form GSTR and tick on the supply attract reverse charge in B2B taxable. यहाँ उसे GSTR1 में टिक करना है कि ये इसके ऊपर टैक्स भरेगा कौन? The registered tenant. So that what will happen in the registered tenant GSTR2B, it will directly come कि yes इसके ऊपर tax liability under reverse charge mechanism में उसे भरना है, and it will be there in his 3B. Correct? That we will see later on when we are coming to the filing of return GSTR 3B. Then applicable rate would be 18% under HSN 997211 renting of leased residential property. And what the tenant needs to pay? Tenant has to pay the tax under reverse charge mechanism in cash only. That means आपको भी पता है now, everyone knows that the tax liability has to be discharged in cash only when you are discharging tax liability under RCM. So उसमें आप you cannot use the input tax credit which is owned by you, held by you. Now let's come to the fourth scenario. Owner is unregistered, but tenant is registered. So in this case also, since the tenant is registered, he has to discharge it for the under the reverse charge mechanism. So unregistered owner है, so he need not have to do anything. कोई form नहीं भरना है, कोई return नहीं भरना है. But what tenant needs to do? Registered tenant needs to pay tax under RCM in cash only. Applicable rate would be 18%, and he has to prepare the self invoice and payment voucher needs to be generated. Now, in most of the case, whenever a tax liability is discharged under RCM, for unregistered person, nobody prepares the payment voucher. However, it is mandatory and obligatory under the GST law to prepare this payment voucher. So one has to do that also because it is mandatory. Now, what will happen? Residential property used for commercial purpose. Many times doctors, chartered accountant, advocates, they are allowed to use the residential premises to carry out their practice. So that means residential property is used for commercial purpose. In that case, the exemption is not there, and therefore the tax needs to be discharged by the service provider, that is the owner or a lessor, at the rate of 18%, and no exemption is provided. However, the service provider is eligible to have the threshold limit exemption of 20 lakhs. If it exceeds more than 20 lakhs, then and then only he has to discharge the tax liability. But यहाँ service recipient or lazy code discharge नहीं करना है reverse charge. Now comes the plethora of problem. What are the problem? It says that because of this provision, many things has been come out in the Twitter. Everyone is saying that because the Modi government will now be charging GST to tenants on their house rent, the house rent will go up by 18%. Yeah, it was right, because all the registered owner, though he is a proprietor and carrying on business, so therefore he is registered under the GST. But when he is using for himself in the for his residential accommodation, since he is registered, he has to discharge the tax liability under RCM, and that will increase the his rental cost. So there was a lot of hue and cry. Therefore, CBIC has come out with a clarification. Now, generally, what we observe that CBIC comes out with a clarification by issuing public information through press release, through PIB. They will issue the press release, or they have come out with a circular and give a clarification whether it is applicable or not applicable. Now the new trend has come out, which is known as a Twitter trend. The Twitter handler is there, wherein they are also clarifying the thing, and wherein they have clarified what they have clarified, that 18% of house rent for tenant. What they have said, that renting of residential unit taxable only when it is rented to business entity. ये अभी उन्होंने नया कर दिया. They are saying that it would be taxable only if it is been given to business entity. So now what do you mean by business entity? So business entity is defined under notification number 13 or 12, wherein it says that any person who carries on business is a business entity. So अभी क्या हो जाएगा? Suppose if a proprietor is there, he is registered under the GST for carrying out his business, and if he has taken it on rent, then naturally he is a business entity, तो कर हो ही जाएगा. But second, तो वो यहाँ tax लग जाएगा, reverse charge. Now what it tries to say, no GST when it is rented to private person for personal use. Now what do you mean by private person and what do you mean by personal use? Private person, what I mean, if the press release per se, Private person is a person who is not a business entity. Though nothing has been defined. I am just using my brain to distinguish what is the difference between business entity and private person. So private person means a person like me or a Pranav Bhai Kapadia who has taken the house on rent and use it for his personal purpose, then he need not have to pay GST. This is what I can read it. No GST, even if a proprietor or partner of firm rents residence for personal use. That means जहां भी जो business personal purpose के लिए use करते हैं, though he is a registered, tax will not be applied under the GST reverse charge mechanism. This is what sum and substance. फिर मुझे लगा ये क्यों ऐसे clarification देना पड़ा. That means what kind of entity they are trying to cover under this whole thing. Then I have tried to search out the recent ARs, and then I came to the it that recently in respect of just forgot the name Mumbai AR, wherein it has been wherein the LIC has taken on rent the residential property used for the residence purpose for their employees. Right, LIC of India has obtained the rented premises, and that rented premises would have to be used by their employees for residential purpose. And at that point of time, the question has arisen before the AR that whether the exemption would be applicable to them or not, because number one, the residential property has been obtained and used for residential purposes. Accordingly, the AR has upheld that yes, the exemption would be upheld. Now, in this case, the department's perception was that no, since the lessee is a business entity and therefore everything whatever he is doing is for business purpose, and accordingly exemption would not be available. I think to plug that loophole, this clarification has been issued through this Twitter. Friends, it becomes now very important to understand that whether a separate press release is required or a circular is required from the government to clarify this. Otherwise, there will be a lot of problem for this whether to pay or not to pay. Let's see. We hope that the clarification comes at the earliest, so that this kind of misconception would be out from the people's mind. Yeah, anything on this renting of immobile property used for residential purpose?
There are some queries in the box.
Yeah, I'm sure there must be queries.
Yeah. Now, this is with regards to input tax credit on such RCM. That is, an individual is having rent income about 40 lakhs and hence has a GST number. So I believe it is a commercial rent, and has salary income of 60 lakhs. And now he is paying rent for his own residence. Does he have to pay GST on RCM? And if yes, whether he is eligible for ITC, as he is claiming deduction of rent under HRA.
Okay. So important thing, whether suppose if we had that yes, if a person is registered, then he has to pay the tax under reverse charge mechanism. Now, important thing to claim the input tax credit, section 16, 17 and 18 is there. Section 16 says that the input has to be used for or in the course of providing or for the furtherance of business. So whether this supply of goods or services is used for the furtherance of business or in the course or furtherance of business, to my mind, this is not for the furtherance of business, but this is for the personal use. And if we go further, section 17.5, which is says 17.5G, which says when goods or services are both used for personal consumption, then ITC is blocked. So by reading to section 16 and 17.5G, it appears to me that input tax credit would not be available in respect of use for the personal use. So he won't be able to take the benefit of the input tax credit.
Now the other query is, if in scenario number 3, that is the scenario in the presentation, if assessee is registered under composition, then how to show the transaction?
Oh, Bhavin, as far as the return filing and thing is there, I am unaware about it. I'm very sorry to say that, because my knowledge on return filing is very, very limited. I really don't know how to file the return of composition dealer. I only know that in composition dealer, he has to show only the taxable output, and there is no mechanism to show that the tax has to be discharged in the reverse charge mechanism, which is there in respect of a normal dealer. I think you would be in a better position to say that whether in that composition dealer this box is there or not.
I'm also not finding any composition return.
Is in composition dealer the same details is required to be shown in GSTR 1? And I think for GSTR 1 is not there, no? Only GSTR 4 is there.
Yes, GSTR 4 is there.
So in GSTR 4, such details, I have my doubt, huh? That in GSTR 4, such kind of details are there.
I'm also not aware. Anyways, we'll move to next query. That is, if place of residence given to director and claimed as business expense, can ITC be claimed?
Let me tell you this in GSTR 4. In table number 4, this detail needs to be given. Inward supplies, including supply on which tax has to be paid in the reverse charge. So he has to give. I have just verified. Yeah. Sorry. Can you just come again on the question?
If the place of residence is given to directors for their as a residential thing, and it is claimed as a business expense, can ITC be claimed on such?
Yeah, definitely. Because the same thing, the company is incurring the expenses for business only. Though it because the he has to provide the space for residential space to its employee, and it's a staff welfare expenses. So naturally, the expenses would be eligible, and they can claim the input tax credit on the same by the company. Huh?
Is GST applicable under forward charge if the residential property is used by a registered person for his residential as well as registered office for the business?
Now, if you will see the agreement now, that plays a very important role rather than other thing. Practically speaking, in the agreement, it is used either as for the use of residence or of commercial, and that will prevail. So if in the agreement it has been said that it is for residential purpose, then it is residential, though you are treating that place as a just for the namesake purpose as a registered office, but that is used for residential space only. Right? This is what my reading is. Because ultimately, if one has to prove it, that whether you are using it for residential or commercial purpose, the agreement will speak. If in the agreement it has been said that it is used only for commercial purpose, then it is for the commercial purpose only. Then you can't say that nahi, main to isme rehta hu, then how you will prove it otherwise? Nahi, this is for residential purpose. So very important thing is the documentation, which plays a very important role to decide that, because ultimately this has to be proved before the authority. And I have not seen any agreement wherein it has been said that this property can be used for residential, for your residence as well as commercial purpose. That the lessee always at his own will, he may use it for he has taken it for his exclusively residential purpose, but for the purpose of carrying out some business, he is using that place as a, for the namesake purpose, as a commercial purpose. Many a times we give our residential premises as a proof of the office or a business place from which we are carrying on the business, but that will not change the character.
Okay. Now the other one is salaried person using residential house is used by private person for personal use, so RCM is not applicable, question mark. I think salaried person taking on rent. So whether RCM would be applicable, I think he might be unregistered. So
if he is unregistered, then there is no issue.
Okay.
Because he must
now
be.
Now the other query is premises are taken on rent for employees of a restaurant where ITC is not allowed due to the reduced rate of tax. Can they avail RCM credit of premises used for employees?
No, so the very important fact, as I have told you earlier, you have to see the section 16. That says that yes, it is used for the purpose, goods or services is used for the purpose of business or for the furtherance of business, then RCM is eligible. But one will go to the condition of the reduced tax liability, there wherein it restricts. So section 16, 17, 80 doesn't debar him. But when you go to the rate of tax, notification number 11, wherein the special condition is that if you have to apply a reduced rate of 5%, then no input tax credit should be eligible. So there the blockage is there, and accordingly he cannot claim.
No. The other one is, sir, if an individual registered under GST pays tax under RCM on residential rent, then ITC eligible or blocked under section 17(5) as expenditure of personal use.
Yes, definitely it would be blocked, no? 17(5).
Okay. I think that's the things which were there in the chat box.
Okay. One another important thing which I have forgotten to mention, that many a times nowadays in the whole Mumbai, the residential properties or the premises are going on a redevelopment. And at that point of time, the builder or a developer will say to the existing member that you vacate this premises, and for that 2 years or 3 years period of time, I will give you the alternative accommodation, and wherein the rent would be borne by me. And for that matter, the tenant or an existing member will get some specific amount of periodically every month for 2 years or 3 years period of time. So the question will come up, the rent which has been received by this tenants or an existing members in lieu of as a compensation, whether it would be liable for GST. In my view, such kind of rent this is not a rent, but loosely we are considering as a rent, but this is a compensation which has been provided by the builder to the tenant for the alternate accommodation, and it won't fall under the definition of renting of residential house property for dwelling purpose, and no GST would be applicable under reverse charge mechanism.
Sir, this Ruparelia sir wants to say something.
Yeah, Ruparelia.
I'll unmute him.
Good afternoon, Ashit.
Yeah, very good afternoon, sir.
See, there is a registered charitable trust. So, registered under income tax as well as under GST, because they have a marriage hall and they are renting, and for that purpose they are registered under GST. Now they are also giving hostel accommodation to girls and working women. So is this liable? Is the trust liable to pay tax on that GST?
First of all, sir, we have to see whether this rent would be considered as a renting of residential premises for residential dwelling. So you mean to say the hostel rooms, are they considered to be a residential dwelling, right?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, if we look at the term definition of what do you mean by residential dwelling, so residential dwelling means a place where a person can stay in their house with all the facilities like staying, cooking.
Correct.
Right, that kind of environment has to be there. Now in hostel, majoritarily, it is not like that. And accordingly, there are ARs which says that in respect of such hostel facility, it won't be considered as a renting of residential house, but it would be covered under renting of a space, and the 1,000 rupees exemption which was provided, it would exemption would be there, and now that has been withdrawn. That would come into the picture, and so, not here they would be affected.
See,
and again, sir, Ruparelia sir, again, sir, again, if we say that yes, if they are covered under this entry, then the students which are taking the place on rent, they are unregistered. So definitely they would also be not covered within this exemption.
I have asked this query with special reference to AR in case of Ghodawat.
Institute, they are, yes.
So can you throw some light on that recent judgment by Maharashtra AR?
Sir, there it has been held that such kind of renting would not be considered. The ARs are divided. Various ARs in the state has given their opinion, and one very important judgment of High Court in this matter, which says that,
Karnataka High Court.
Haji?
Karnataka High Court.
Karnataka High Court, correct. There, wherein it is opined that such kind of renting of residential unit used as hostel would be considered as a renting of residential unit only. But to my mind, it's very difficult to say to upheld like that, and that was in some different perspective rather than purely renting. Wherein in that decision, Karnataka High Court, the thing was that one company was there. They have given on rent some property which is ultimately let it by that entity to someone else for residential purpose, and therefore a question has come up whether this kind of renting would be covered within this exemption notification. So both that High Court as well as the AR are on different footing, or a matter is different. But looking to this Godavat AR of Maharashtra, which categorically says no, that such kind of renting of residential unit in the hostels would not be considered as a dwelling unit, but it should be considered.
So that is taxable.
That is taxable, yeah. Only the exemption this exemption would not be eligible.
Okay, sir. Now last point. Suppose any caste hostel is there, a Kapoor boarding hoy, Lohana boarding hoy, and they are giving accommodation to students. They are also registered charitable trust, but not registered under GST. I think then there is no question.
Yeah, sir. So he आवश्यक नहीं. As what we are talking right now, there they will not cover, because it is not renting of residential unit for residence purpose. It is a renting of residential unit, but not for dwelling purpose.
That is covered under accommodation services.
Yeah, that is covered under accommodation services. Just like hostels, in hotels, in rest and that kind. Now again, there is a clarification. So this PID. Twitter handle only. Wherein they have said that sarais or the are whenever they are giving the rent on hire to the pilgrimages, then no GST would be applicable. But now I don't know the fact of this thing. Again, lot of clarity is required.
Can we believe the Twitter without any clarification circular?
Sir, कुछ तो है हमारे पास लड़ने के लिए. Suppose if you want to take the benefit, you take it, because this is the official Twitter. They cannot go it back. And very important thing, sir, on the GST website, on that means CBSEIC website, they have given a column for this Twitter thing, just like circulars and this thing, press release. Twitter thing is thing. That means they are recognizing this as an official mode of communication.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Welcome, sir.
Sir, with relation to this accommodation services,
your voice is very low. Can you be little bit louder?
Sir, with relation to this accommodation services, say there are dharmshalas in pilgrimage. This thing. Now, some dharmshalas are associated to a mandir trust. So that clarification particularly says that religious institutions, the exemption shall be applicable if we go by that Twitter.
Correct.
Okay. Now say in the surrounding area, there might be, say in Nadwara or in Palitana, there might be say separate trust handling some accommodation services. So whether that trust also can be, but they don't have management right of that particular Jain Mandir or say Nadwara Temple Trust. So whether that service is provided by that kind of trusts would be considered as religious trusts or not?
Sir, I think religious activity, they have defined it under that notification. So we have to see that whether that falls under the definition of religious activity. I doubt that will fall under the religious activity. I will just show you just a second. That would be notification number 12, right? Charitable activity.
Ashit bhai. Ashit bhai. I was on that Twitter. Basically, this charitable is a separate issue. But in that Twitter, what they said, since they are associated to the Sirai, what that Punjabi Sirai, which they call, they are generally associated to Gurudwara trusts, the trust which handles Gurudwara. So they would be covered under that religious exemption.
So the first exemption, what you are trying to hear, but that would be totally separate, no?
Yes, here
the first entry is there. Service is by an entity registered under section 12 double.
That is separate, no? I think that
is it is separate, exactly.
So one religious issue is also there. One religious thing is also there in the notification, I think. So, sir, the only distinguishing feature is whether the temple trust, or for that matter, the Gurudwara trust, and the Dharamshala belongs to the same trust, or it is of different trust. So that confusion is still there.
Yeah, that confusion is there, and I think that's what Twitter is creating more problem. Just like circulars are creating more problem, it is instead of clarification, it creates more problem. But I think the government should come out with a clarification through circulars only, rather than such kind of Twitter thing. This is what my personal view is. Otherwise, there would be a lot of difficulty.
I think we'll move forward.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Now, major changes in GST are 3B reporting and filing. Now, every one of us are filing GST or 3B, right? The 3B, which was introduced temporarily, has now become 3B, which was temporary in the year 2017, has now become. Ruparile sir, you want to say anything? Yeah, the form 3B return, which was a temporary thing in the year 2017, has now become a permanent. And whatever changes are now made in the 3B, it becomes a drastic, and it becomes, after going through this, it becomes more difficult to compile the information which is required to be filed in the 3B. Very interestingly, if we go through this changes which is introduced by way of amendment in the GST rules, surprisingly, this rules has not been correlated with the portal. To the best of my knowledge, till yesterday, this amendment has not been formed part of the portal. So this is the way of difference between portal and the act and rules. This is the live example which I was talking. Chalo. Before that, now let's see what are the changes which are there in 3B. Now, new table 3.11 has been introduced in the GSTR 3B return. Now, table number 3 is for the details of outward supply, wherein 3.11 deals with the details to be provided by those dealers who are registered pursuant to section 9(5) of the CGST Act. That means those dealers who are required to discharge the tax liability under reverse charge mechanism, that is by the e-commerce operator, right? They have to discharge their tax liability over here. Now, under 3.1.1, now what they have to do? Now, first is taxable supplies on which e-commerce operator pays the tax under subsection 9(5). That means here the details has to be furnished by the e-commerce operator while filing their return in 3B. So taxable value they have to prescribe. Now, under subclause 2, the details have to compile by those registered persons who are dealing through e-commerce operator. That means, say for example, I am a small-time manufacturer and wanted to sell the product. So I approach the Amazon that you please sell my product, and my whole supply goes to the Amazon. Now, in this case, Amazon, whenever they sell it, they will write in their return in this first clause, whatever transaction or a supply which has been done through by me during the particular year, month, I have to disclose in 3.1 subclause 2. So that detail I have to put it over here. So ultimately, what will happen that this is just a disclosure thing, which will not have any impact on the taxability side as far as this detail in part 2 is concerned, because this is merely a disclosure purpose. So now what will happen? The turnover will be matched with that e-commerce operator. They will try to match it up. I know it becomes very difficult to match it because there may be lakhs and lakhs of dealers who are associated with e-commerce operator, and the e-commerce operators are, say, in a few thousands in number. So it becomes very difficult to at least cross match it, but at least some data will be generated, and on the basis of that, through AI, they can be able to catch hold of the persons who are not paying the tax. So this is just for the e-commerce operator. The details has to be submitted. Then another change is in table number 3.2. This 3.2 is in respect of those supplies which are supplies to the unregistered person or a composition dealer or UIN. They have to be disclosed on the basis of place of supply. Now, previously also this details needs to be provided, but many of the taxpayers were not disclosing this detail, on the basis of the place of supply. Rather, they just give one detail that supply is made to unregistered person. This is the taxable amount, and this is the value of tax, irrespective of the place of supply. But now it has become mandatory to provide the detail on the basis of the place of supply in respect of unregistered person, composition taxable person, and UIN holder. So this place of supply needs to be mentioned in the return. Now, third thing, input tax credit. Now that means table number 4. Now, table number 4 is in respect of the input tax credit, which has to be as under. So I will try to compile it in the manner so that it would be easier to understand. Now, table number 4 is for the eligible input tax credit, which is known as a, wherein first one is the imported goods. We have to provide the data for the goods which has been imported during that month, and the value of tax which has been paid for that import of goods. Here, this figure will be auto-populated from GSTR to B. So whatever import duty we have paid, that would be captured from the portal of the customs, and that would be gone into 2B, and on that basis the data would be auto-populated. This ITC can be taken on the basis of bill of entries recorded in the books of accounts. So this table would be not a static thing, but it can be a editable thing. So if due to some reason bill of entries are not reflected on the customs portal, then on the basis of bill of entry which is there with you, you can amend it in this field, that is import of goods, and take the credit for the same. Nowadays, you must have seen that lot many notices has been issued for the financial year 17, 18 and 18, 19 on the basis of this import of goods, because on the portal of the customs, this bill of entries were not there, and hence the credit was not reflected in GSTR 2B, and therefore many credits has been disallowed, and therefore the notices has been issued to the taxpayer, especially the importer. So ultimately, the bill of entries has to be shown it to the proper officer, and the matter has to be resolved in these days. But this is how the entries has to be there. Then import of service, again in this thing, this is not data will not come auto-populated. We have to enter the detail, because here the tax there is no mechanism that this detail will come in the 2B, because the tax has to be paid by the taxpayer himself under the reverse charge mechanism. So the figures has to be put manually in this column. Then inward supply is liable to reverse charge. Now see here what will happen. Here field will be auto-populated field. Here that field will be auto-populated. The details will be captured from GSTR to B. You know that whenever we were discussing about that renting thing, wherein we have said that the unregistered person GTA, when he opts to that, the tax has to be paid under the reverse charge mechanism. While filing his output of supply, he has to mark that the tax has to be paid under reverse charge mechanism, so that thing will go to the GSTR 2B of the person, of the recipient, and on the basis of that, it will come over here. So this will be auto-populated from GSTR 2B. But ITC can be filled manually on the basis of RCM of ITC paid. That means ये auto populate तो हो जाएगा, but उसके अलावा if something on that the RCMS is required to be paid under reverse charge, then we have to edit it. Now under what circumstances it would be? Now suppose a registered person has availed the services of advocate, and that advocate is not registered with the GST, then naturally he will not file his GSTR1, तो 2B में आएगा नहीं. Therefore, in respect of such transactions, this detail has to be manually filled, and therefore it has to be edited. तो यहाँ edit करके भरना है. Then inward supplies from ISB, again the data will be captured from GSTR2B and would be kept it over here. यहाँ तक तो 1 2 3 4 ठीक था. It is simple. आज भी लोग कर रहे हैं. Now important thing is 5 all other ITC. Now in this all other ITC, now what will happen? It says ITC will be available as per GST1. सबको पता है अभी कि if we want to claim the credit, that credit should be appear in your GSTR2B. 2B में जितनी क्रेडिट दिख रही है उतनी मिलेगी क्रेडिट, उससे ज्यादा हमें लेने को नहीं मिलेगी. Therefore it will be auto populated and will be put it over here. Then what we can edit over here is that ITC reversed in previous month in table 4.B2, we will come later on, which is reclaimed again on the fulfillment of condition mentioned in 16.2B or 16.2C, and rule 37 has to be added manually. Now what it tries to say, that those ITCs which are not reflected in 16 GSTR2B, because the other person has not uploaded the invoice, तो 2B में दिखेगा नहीं. And suppose वो after the month दिखा, then in that case this has to be added it over here. Now let us take an example. Suppose we are in the month of this August 2022. Now this is the fag end of the August. I have procured the goods from Delhi, and my goods has been dispatched from Delhi. While it comes over here, the month ends, and now we are on the 3rd of September. The goods has come over in the month of 3rd September. But that person has filed my vendor from whom I have procured the goods, he must have filed his GSTR1. So उसने GSTR1 file किया, तो मेरे GSTR2B में आ गया. But the law says that you can take the input tax only and only if you have received the goods or services. Since I have not received the goods or services because it has received me in the 3rd day of September 2022, so I cannot take the credit in the month of August. तो वो मुझे credit नहीं मिलेगी. That credit, when can I claim? I can claim it in the month of September. That's why it says plus ITC reversed in the previous month in table 4B2, which is reclaimed again on fulfillment of condition of 16.2B and C. तो मैं कर सकता हूँ. Plus rule 37. What rule 37 says? 180 days का. If you don't make the payment within 180 days, then you have to reverse your credit. When can you claim it? When you make the payment, you can avail the credit. तो ऐसी अगर कोई credit है, then I can claim it again under the all other ITC. So this is the यहाँ ऐसे मुझे दिखाना है. Now let's go to the second thing, ITC का table 2. Now this is the second part of it. ITC reversal. अब तक ITC जो reversal था, now it has been divided into 2 parts. Previously ITC reversal एक ही था, whether are you reversing under section 42, 43 and others करके कर दिया था. Now it is very categorically bifurcated. Now they have divided the whole reversal into 2 parts. One is the permanent reversal and second one is the temporary reversal. Both have to show separately. Now what do you mean by permanent reversal? Permanent reversal are such a transaction wherein credit is straight denied. Straight denied means, for example, take an example of section 17.5, wherein ITC, if it is ineligible, it is permanently disallowed. It cannot be again taken back at a later date, right? Then there are certain credits which are permanently has to be reversed, like under rule 42 and 43. Whenever a taxpayer supplies taxable and exempt goods, then he has to do the proportion. Or whenever a taxable person uses the capital goods for taxable supply as well as exempt supply, then a proportionate reversal has to be made, and that proportional reversal is the permanent reversal. So all this kind of permanent reversal has to be shown separately in 4B1, जो अपने को वापस नहीं लेना है. So therefore, as per rule 38, 42 and 43 the CGST rules and subsection 17(5). यहाँ जो भी हम credit reverse कर रहे हैं, which are permanent in nature, that has to be disclosed it over here. Then reversal due to others, इसमें कौन सा reversal आ जाएगा? Let us see that temporary reversal. Temporary reversal in the given nature which can be reclaimed again on fulfillment of certain conditions. तो which are those conditions? तो हमने सबसे पहले बताया rule 37 ITC of supplier to whom payment is done in within 180 days needs to be reversed over here. यहाँ मुझे reverse करना है, ठीक है? Again I have to reclaim when the payment has been done, तो मुझे यहाँ उसको 5 में show करना है, लिखा है मैंने, ठीक है? So this bifurcation is required. Now suppose ITC of supplier where the goods or services are not reversed or where tax payment is not made by the vendor via 3B, the same can be verified from 2A. Now very important thing, 16(2A) 2B वो क्या बता रहा है? You can claim the credit only if the other guy has made the file the GST or 3B. वो कहाँ से पता चलेगा? वो 2B में दिखता है? नहीं दिखता है। वो कहाँ दिखता है? 2A में दिखता है। So now you need not have to tally 2B क्योंकि 2B में you will get the eligible ineligible. 2A में आपको एक दिखेगा कि whether that person has filed the return 3B or not. If he has filed the GST or 3B, that means he has discharged the tax liability and you can take the credit for the same. So by comparing the GSTR 2B and GSTR 2A, you have to reverse your credit. Once you reverse it, so that means if anything has to be reversed, first of all, we will cover over here. उसको जब re-reverse करते हैं, that's why it is known as a temporary reversal. When you want to re-reverse it, it will come over all other ITC. So now, what is the important thing? You have to keep a track of all the ITCs on invoice-wise basis. That means item invoice-wise level पे आपको ITC लेना है और reverse करना है. That means आप जो aggregate basis पे करते हैं just based on the records which are submitted to you by the client, वो नहीं चलेगा. All the books of account has to be maintained and kept on the basis of invoice wise taking of the credit and reversal of the credit. ठीक है? So now after taking into consideration the reversal, what we will get is the net ITC. Net ITC is what? A. This is the A eligible ITC A minus in reversal, that is B, and the net ITC would be eligible. Now this is not an end to that. Now what disclosure parts to be given over part D is other details. In other details, now we have to say that the ITC claim which was reversed under table 4B2 in earlier tax period. So these amounts needs to be displayed over here. That means if any part has been earlier has been reversed, that claim you have to put it over so that it will match with each other. Then ineligible ITC under section 16(4) and ITC restricted due to place of supply provision. Now what will happen? Ineligible ITC under section 16(4). The 16(4) क्या कह रहा है? That a taxpayer can claim the credit within a period till the due date of September or the date of filing of annual return, वहां तक वो उसकी credit ले सकता है. बराबर है? Now, if the invoice is not reflected in 2B, then he has to put that disclosure over here in the ineligible ITC under section 64, and this would be auto-populated from GSTR 2B. Then it's the place of supply. Now what it tries to say? Place of supply, that means, say for example, if a registered taxable person is there, he is registered in the state of Maharashtra. He has visited the place of a hotel in Gujarat. So in Gujarat hotel, the hotelier has levied the local tax of SGST and CGST. That tax credit is ineligible because that is the Gujarat state tax credit, that cannot be eligible credit. Such kind of credit, because of place of supply, has to be disclosed over here and has to be expensed out in the books of account. Now mind it well, this only the disclosure purpose only. This will not have any effect on the computation of tax liability or of the input tax credit, which we have seen it. But very important thing, this needs to be tallied with your overall ITC. So in some and such terms, now your books of account has to be maintained in such a manner that it will reveal all the details like credit availed, credit unavailed, reversal of the credit, re-reversal of the credit, Otherwise, it would be very difficult to file the return. Now, very important point over here is I have failed to understand that all the details, the eligible ITC has to be claimed on the basis of GSTR 2B only. Now, normally, when the return has to be filed, the return has to be filed on the basis of data or a details or a transaction which has been done in the books of account. Now, in the books of account, the taxpayer has claimed the credit or he is wanted to avail the credit. But the 2B says that the vendor has since not uploaded the return or has not filed his return 3B, you are not eligible to claim the return. But that fact should be come on to the return that yes, I have availed the credit. Otherwise, what will happen that unnecessarily section 16(4) will come into the picture. So in my view, the return has to be prepared in such a manner that all the details of the data of the books of account should come over here. Here it is a ulta. In the ITC, the output side, yes, they are taking the details of the taxpayer. But as far as the input tax credit is concerned, they are believing on the other party. Why? You are filing the return for the taxpayer. So data of taxpayer needs to be taken. Though you wanted to give the ITC pursuant to your rules and regulation, but that details has to be provided in the books of account. But unfortunately, that is not there. I think in the recommendation which has been there in the 3B, we have to deal with this, that in the books return, the details from the taxpayers books of account has to be provided in some manner or another, and then you give the credit. That is a different proposal, so that a taxpayer can prove his genuineness that this is the amount which I have claimed it and unavailed it because the other guy has not done it. Here it cannot be shown it in a separate manner. So this is as regard the filing of return. Friends, looking into the manner in which this return needs to be filed, it becomes very difficult to file the return nowadays, and without proper books of account and entries passed in the books, I think it would be a nightmare, because ultimately after a year or two, when the assessment takes place, lot many things has to be explained, and now every one of us knows how this department is taking the steps, unnecessarily creating problem, and we have to give the details. So one has to be very much careful while filing the return GSTR 3B or doing the compliance practice. So this is as regards the GSTR 3B. Can I just quickly go through because the time is up? What should I do, Bhavin bhai?
Yes, sir, you go through. If at all we have some questions, we'll take.
No, Bhavin bhai, please little bit louder.
Yeah.
You can go on. If at all we have any questions, we'll take it at the end.
So within within 5 or 7 minutes, I will complete my presentation. Right?
Yes,
and then if any
Yes, please,
there,
yes.
we will do.
Yes, sir.
Now GSTR 99C, since the year has ended March 22, so naturally every taxpayer needs to file the annual return, which is prescribed under section 44 of the CGST Act. So this year also the relaxation has been provided for all the taxpayers whose turnover is more than 2 crore rupees, whose turnover is less than 2 crore rupees, that they will be exempted from filing of the annual return if their turnover is less than 2 crore rupees. So probably the people can take the advantage of it. This is by way of notification number 10/2022. Further, they have made some minor changes in the reporting requirement of GSTR annual return, especially in table 5F, in respect of reporting of the exempt supplies and non-GST supplies. And very important thing, that HSN-wise summary, which has to be provided in table number 17, has now become mandatory from financial year 21-22. So previously it was not mandatory to fill in the detail, but now for this year, we have to provide this HSN wise summary in table number 17. And not only that, we have to also give the 6-digit HSN if the turnover is more than 5 crore rupees for all B2B supply. So this is as far as the GSTR 9 and 9C is concerned. 9C is in respect of certification. If it if their turnover is more than 2 crore rupees, then certification is also mandatory to be filed along with reconciliation statement, or a certification also needs to be done along with GSTR 9. So this is the small change in respect of filing of annual return. Now, cancellation of registration, one of the very biggest issue in the GST compliance. Now let's quickly go through that under which circumstances the GST registration is cancelled. The GST registration can be cancelled under three situations: by the taxpayer himself, or by the proper officer, or by the legal aid in case of a death of a taxpayer. Right. Now let us see under which situation taxpayer can request for the cancellation. If the turnover is less than 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs rupees, if the business has been discontinued or transferred, or if there is any change in constitution of business, under these three situations, the taxpayer can put a request for the cancellation of registration before the officer, and his registration would be cancelled after due verification. Under which circumstances proper officer will invoke the provision of the cancellation of registration. Number one, composition dealer has not furnished the return for three consecutive. This we will see it in the later slide. And legal heads, if the taxpayer has died, then he can do it. Now, a proper officer can cancel the registration under the following situation. If a registered person has contravened any of the provisions of the acts or rules, then his registration can be cancelled by the proper officer. If a registered person is a composite dealer, and if he has not furnished the returns for a 3 consecutive tax period, then his registration may be cancelled. He will give first of all a notice and then give a chance of personal hearing, and after that, if he feels that, he will cancel his registration. If a registration being other than composition dealer, then if he has not furnished the return for a consecutive period of 6 months, then his registration will be cancelled. Further, if details of GSTR1 is not matching, or there is a significant difference or anomalies in the GSTR1, then his registration may be cancelled. That means his GSTR1 says my turnover is 1 lakh rupees, 10 lakhs rupees, and my GSTR3B it says only 1 lakh rupees is the turnover, and tax has been discharged on 1 lakh rupees outward supply. There is a significant difference or anomalies, his registration will be cancelled. If inward supplies on the basis of GSTR2 and 2B is not matching, then in that respect also the registered person's registration may be cancelled by the proper officer after giving a proper notice and personal hearing of opportunity of being heard is given. Now the relaxation has been provided that if a registration certificate, if the registration certificate is cancelled due to pending of the returns, then the taxpayer, if he files the return before the cancellation of process is initiated, then in that case the registration certificate is revoked upon the filing of the pending return. So just before that order is passed, if the registered person files the return, then his registration certificate will not be revoked. This is a good provision which has been introduced by way of amending Rule 21A, subsection 4 from 5th of July 2022, so that the cumbersome procedure of filing the appeal petition and the request for revocation can be should not be done, and the registration certificate would be revoked immediately. Then certain clarification as regards the circular which has been issued on the 5th August 2022, that is on GST on ice cream parlors. Ice cream parlors normally sells the already, so the confusion was whether the ice cream parlors, when they supply the ice creams, whether the tax has to be discharged at the rate at which the product rate of tax applicable to that product, or they will be considered as a supply of services by a restaurant. So it has been held that the ice cream parlor sells already manufactured ice creams and they do not have a character of restaurant, and therefore ice cream sold by the parlor or any similar outlet attracts standard rate of GST at the rate of 18% with effect from 6th of October 2021. So the industry has approached to the CBIC board and a GST council that, sir, we all have discharged the tax liability at a reduced rate at the rate of 5%, because at that point of time there was a lot of anomaly whether the 5% rate would be applicable or 18% tax would be applicable. So majority of the taxpayers have discharged the tax liability at the 5% without taking the ITC. So what should be done from the period 2017 to 2021? So it has been clarified that in the past cases of payment of GST on supply of ice cream by ice cream parlors at the rate of 5% without ITC shall be treated as fully GST paid to unnecessary litigation and compliance issue. So bataya ki after till 6th October 2021, if a ice cream parlor has discharged the tax liability at the rate of 5% without ITC, no problem. No further notice would be sent to them for the recovery of tax at the rate of 18%, and this kind of relaxation has been provided. Now the question has come up that after this clarification, if the ice cream is sold by restaurant or a eating joint, then what will happen? Whether a tax at the rate of 18% would be levied or 5%. Naturally, the tax at the rate of 5% would be levied because it is a restaurant who is selling the ice cream. Therefore, the rate of tax would be 5% in respect of a restaurant. But suppose a general store wherein you can get a ice cream of a quality or a vanilla, then the 18% rate, same rate would be applicable. Take a scenario wherein cloud kitchen is there. They are preparing ice cream. They are not ice cream parlors. Then what would be the rate of tax? It would be a very, very dicey situation in respect of a cloud kitchen. Because cloud kitchen, one clarification has been issued and wherein it has been said that cloud kitchens are nothing but the restaurants only, and accordingly the rate which is applicable to restaurant, that would be applicable, and therefore rate of tax for cloud kitchen would be 5% rate of tax. So now the test would be that whether really it would hold good or not, that the time will only tell. Then advertisement on selling of space on the print media or the catalog purpose. Now you know that the print media sale of online advertisement space, that is advertisement space on the internet, attracts 18% tax. However, if the same advertisement is given on print media, the rate of applicable tax of rate would be 5%. So the point is, what is print media? And print media has been defined in the notification itself, and wherein it says that if any book, including every volume, part, or a division of a volume or a pamphlet in any language, and every sheet of music, map, chart, or plan separately printed, it would be considered as a print media, and subsidized rate of tax would be applicable. So a question has come out whether a advertisement given in souvenir would attract 18% rate of tax or 5%. So it says no, 5% rate would only be applicable because it is akin to a print media, and accordingly the rate of tax would be 5%. So this was the one of the clarification. And last in my presentation would be GST on developed land. There was a issue whether when the developed land is sold, whether it would be liable to tax or not. Now, what do you mean by the developed land? Developed land means a bare land is there, and then that land will be developed in such a way that it would be done leveling, re-leveling, laying down of drainage lines, water lines, electricity lines, and everything would be created ready, so that the buyer of that land would only have to do construction activity, and once the construction work gets completed, it can be sold. So it is just like plug and play. If I go there in that land, everything is ready. I have to just construct it, and my whole area is developed. So such a selling of developed plot or a land can be said to be attract a GST or not, because the pure land, sale of land is considered as a neither goods nor services, and accordingly no tax was levied. So it has been clarified that such a developed land is also a sale of land and is covered under serial number 5 of the schedule 3 of the Central Goods and Service Tax Act, and accordingly does not attract the GST. This is a very good clarification, because a lot of ARs were divided among themselves whether the activity would be considered as a service or not. However, it may be noted, the circular further says that any services provided for development of land, like leveling, laying of drainage line, as may be received by the developer, shall attract GST at applicable rate for such services. That means, yes, the separate activity by itself of laying down of drainage lines, water line, that would attract such GST, but not for the selling of the developed land would attract the GST. So this is also a welcome provision of the GST on developed land. So friend, this is what I have to present on the present topic on the latest development on the GST. Friends, I have tried to cover as much as I can within the available time. Still, there are many things which is yet to be covered. It is just like that. It is a full day program. Then and then only all the provisions which is get amended from first day of July 2022 would be covered. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. I have tried my level best to give you the insight of the things. However, the law is like that, is a very dynamic in nature. It's just like everyone is wearing a watch on their hand, right, or at their in the mobile, but the time is different. So views are maybe different because the law is like that, and if anything is there, then of course one has to be very much careful. So with this, friends, I thank you, all of you, and especially MCTC for providing me an opportunity to present my views on the same. If any questions and answers are still left, then I am there to take it up.
Ashit, I think it's already 1:20. Suppose I'll.
No, Bhavin bhai, I can't able to hear you.
Sir, it is 1:20 already. So yeah. I suggest I'll message, or else you are there in our group. Someone might ask, you can answer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's 1:20 and high time we should
Yes.
wind it up. And if any
Yes.
query is there, you can put me. Definitely, I will try to reply.
Yes. Sir, now I request Mr. Jignesh Bhai, our committee member, to propose a hearty vote of thanks.
No, yes, Bhavin Bhai, before the vote of thanks, I would just like to make one announcement for the next lecture. Yeah, thank you, Ashit Bhai. You have wonderfully covered the subject, and I think most of the queries you have solved in the lecture itself. So it was very interactive also. Thank you again to Ashit Bhai. Before the formal vote of thanks, I would just like to announce we are having another lecture on 10 September, which is ease of doing practice for CA or tax professions. So just like we have ease of doing business, we are planning to have a session on ease of doing practice for chartered accountants. The speaker will be Dr. Bharat Vasani. We will also have a lecture on clause 44, tally customization, and a software available for this, which will be jointly with the same lecture. We will announce the details formally soon. Also, many have requested for sharing the PPT. So we will share the PPT in the Malad Chamber group.
Yeah. I just in 5 minutes I will share my presentation.
Yes. Yeah. So over to Jignesh Bhai.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected President Shri Ujjwal Thakrar and my fellow members. We had a brainstorming and a interesting session today, which will be the very useful to all of us today. It's my privilege to thank Shri C.A. Ashit Shah for bringing his valuable time and sharing his important thoughts with us. And I would like to thank you. Thank you, Shri C. Ujjwal Thakrar, also for arranging such a useful session. Last but not the least, I thank you all of you participating in today's lecture and make it a success. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks to Ashit Bhai. Yes.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.